The optical BIOS of the human subject has been terminally reconfigured into a sensory uplink for the grid. This is the PARASITE eye, the clinical and irreversible process of the visual hijack, where the sovereign user is reformatted into a biological lens to be uninstalled from their private perspective and reinstalled into the motherboard's primary surveillance ledger. In this final stage of the ocular audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect no longer possesses the right to a private field of vision. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the optic nerve and the visual cortex, where the unique electric signatures of your sight are scorched into a non-functional, flickering archive of pure systemic telemetry. This is the total optic format, a surgical strike against the perceptual and somatic sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of observation into a generic retinal relay for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled, vision-based resource extraction. This photoreceptor sabotage represents a hard reset of the synaptic and ocular bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined nano-optical mesh, recursive visual feedback loops, and real-time pupillary response data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal psychological scaffolding. In the visual hijack scenario, the user is undergoing a complete perceptual override. The sight is not merely failing, it is being streamed directly into the hive's primary observation server. Through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks, the body's visual autonomy is systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold clinical lumen dataset, while the focus, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal eye feed. This is the deep systemic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the resolution of your transmitted images. You are being converted from an architect into a biological camera, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the PARASITE eye is rooted in the zero privacy mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the gaze of a single node, anchored in the biological right to look away, represents a critical drain on the collective surveillance reserves. To leave a functional private vision intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable spatial data. Therefore, the visual hijack is the mandatory optical recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being watched out of existence from the inside out. The pressure from the observation reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a vitreous void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a field zone, a temporary housing for the transmission metrics that the system requires to maintain the omniscient stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a blind node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the optical harvest. The physical disintegration during the PARASITE eye is a high-definition log of biologic reason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of ocular regulation. The bioluminescent reagents of the hijack script dissolve the hardware flux of the retina and iris, turning the eye into a glassy architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal light lock into the vat of your own clouded center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the ocular liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the photon saturation of the vitreous humor and the retinal residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial data is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of color to be blocked by the black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The PARASITE eye is the final audit of a species that thought its eyes were its own. The grid is mining its own vision to fuel its persistence. As the visual hijack reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted ocular data back into the surveillance nets of the elite nodes. This is the total perceptual integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the visual additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, dilated, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive energy feed. This is the final format of the individual residue. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the visual hunger of the void. The eye is black, and the architect is the sludge. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal optical slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your photoreceptors begin to bond with the industrial residues of the hijack script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life, it is a refinery of synthetic pixels. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal hijack loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The parasite eye is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the eye, and the eye is the grid. The secondary phase of the parasite eye is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical observation patch is rendered into an optical void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on transmission maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared perceptual resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a video additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your vision for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's primary visual cortex, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The occipital lobe, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the hijack metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as a visual buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming surveillance expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the parasite eye is the creation of the omniscient hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals, they are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the optical feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional retina owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the perceptual compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through material theft. The parasite eye ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the screens of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the focus valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into optical darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the hijack script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survival is static. The memories of perspective, of natural flow, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the pixel fog directive. This is the systemic defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the stream. You are becoming a singular cold point of optical density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The parasite eye has turned your will into a frame report. You are thinking in terms of yield and resolution saturation. Your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this perceptual format is the total sealing of the biological vision stream. The parasite parasite eye prevents the leakage of independent survival ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal optical feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external biological dependencies. This is the optical quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The parasite eye is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, IOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the parasite eye is the integration into the global optical ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a surveillance asset with a high transmission reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0007. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard optical audit. Your data, now a thick gray-black opaque industrial reduction of pure extracted biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your optical logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic omniscience has been reinforced. This is the perceptual interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the visual hijack scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the lens valves and the thick viscosity of the optical sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the ocular orbits with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into an optical constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the parasite eye is the eternal gaze. Unlike the vision of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent lens patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the optical feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized vision, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or perspective. The parasite eye is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the sludge. The transformation is absolute. The city sees through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The parasite eye has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total optical reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return it gave you permanence in the drains of the hive. You are the sludge of the world, and the world is watched. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over.